Uh, okay, so if you guys recall, we started learning a new Maimer. Okay, this is our first Maimer. Okay, and it's called Vayishlach Yehoshua. Just to give you a quick recap, in case you guys missed it, or just to refresh your memories. Basically, what happened is like this, right? We are learning. We had a question. The question talks about there's two different accounts of somebody sending spies over somewhere, right? So the first one is the account of Moshe, right? Moses. He sent spies to spy the land of the seven kings, the land of Canaan, which is going to become the land of Israel. Okay, and then you have the other account, which is his successor, Yehoshua. Okay, who's the person that actually led the Jewish people into the land of Israel. He also sent spies. Moshe sent 12 spies. Yeshua sent 2 spies to scout the land of Jericho, right, which is kind of like the entrance. It was called like the gate or the lock to the land of Israel. Now we had a couple of questions, okay, as to the differences between these two accounts, right? The first one was why, when Hashem says to Moses to send the spies, he says, Shlach lecha, send for yourself. And we explain, right? Rashi explains that, what does that mean? It means that Hashem is telling Moses, listen, I'm not commanding you to send spies. If you want to send them, send them. If you don't send them. It's really up to you, okay? It's not a commandment. Whereas by Yeshua, Hashem explicitly commands Yeshua and says to him, you need to send spies to Jericho, okay? So that's the first distinction that we're pointing out. The second distinction is, the fact that Moses sent spies specifically he sent spies to the entire land of Israel, whereas Yehoshua only sent spies to Jericho, right? It was a very focused commandment. He sent them over there and not anywhere else. And we wanted to understand what that meant in a deeper level. As we said, you can answer these questions at multiple different levels, like we studied before, right? You can answer them shot and in different levels. But we want to understand it in the deepest level. What can we learn from this? Okay, so we actually answered the question, right? We said right away, we gave a very deep answer, which we're going to now explore a little bit more in depth. And the answer was like this. The land of Israel, which is the land of the 7 nations, right? There were 7 kings. Okay, so we said that the land of Israel is the land of the 7 kings that we needed to conquer. And that represents our soul, right? As we said, our soul has 7 character traits, 7 spiritual forces, if you will, which start out like the land of Canaan, right? They have animalistic tendencies, not evil per se, but animalistic, okay, self-serving, base, hedonistic, right? And our goal is to take that, the land of Canaan, and we should conquer it and turn it into the land of Israel, right? Turn those 7 character traits into godly character traits, use them only for godly things, for good things. And that is what conquering the land of Israel represents, okay? Conquering the 7 kings represents conquering and overturning the 7 character traits in our soul, right? And we spoke about them just to give you a quick recap. We said there was, kindness, severity, compassion. One of them was like victory, acknowledgement, or glory, and then the foundation, and then there's kingship. And we could go into each one and understand them, but we're not going to do that today. So we said that this idea that Moses, God says to Moses, send if you want to the land of Israel, implies this idea of conquering and overturning these character traits and changing them altogether. And God says to Moses, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't, because it's something that not everybody can be commanded, because not everybody can accomplish it 100%, right? Changing your nature is something extremely difficult, and not everybody is able to 100% do it. So God cannot command us if it's not something that we can 100% accomplish. This is something that tzaddikim, very unique people, work on, but we don't have the ability 100% to guarantee that we're going to do it. So God will not command us something that we can't 100% accomplish. So that's what this sending of the spies to Israel, to the entire land, represents. Now, Jericho, we said, is related to something else, right? The soul has these 7 character traits, but then it also has what's called the levushim, the garments, right? Those garments are 3 garments: thought, speech, and action. Jericho represents these garments, okay? Right? Again, as we said, our soul invests itself to relate to the world in these 3 garments through thinking, speaking, and acting, right? And that's what Jericho represents. So God commands Yeshua, you send spies and you go scout out Jericho, again, representing a person's thought, speech, and action, right? And that is a commandment because that is something that is in everybody's ability to control, right? You may not be able to change, right? Or to affect all that much your nature, whether you're a kind person or you have, let's put it this way, you have kind tendencies or you have more severe tendencies, right? You may not be able to change your nature at its base, but you definitely can change how that nature expresses itself through thought, speech, and action. And that's why God commanded Yeshua, Jericho, right? Thought, speech, and action, the levushim, that you have to go and spy, that you definitely have to, you don't have an option. That you have to go and scout out and make sure that it's all being used in the right way. Okay, so that was what we said on our last class. But then we have a question, and the question was, well, everything in the Torah is a message, is a eternal teaching for every single Jew, right? So the Torah does tell us the story of the spies that went to the land that Moses sent. And if it's in the Torah, that means that in one way or another, it has to talk to everybody. It has to talk to me, right? So we just said that this applies specifically to tzaddikim, very, very holy people that are able to conquer their nature and completely overturn their nature and mold it, right? But not everybody's able to do that. So what if it's in the Torah, however, it means that somehow it has to talk to me too. I can't say this doesn't apply to me if it's in the Torah. So how can we say such things? You see, there's a dilemma here. And we're going to answer that question. We're going to say like this, right? There's a very, very stark difference between our involvement with the thought, speech, and action and our involvement with our 7 character traits, right? As we said, one of them you are 100% are in full control, even though it's hard. That's thought, speech, and action. The other one you're not. But even if you're not in full control, even if God cannot command you to do it, because again, you're not guaranteed that you're able to succeed, right? Nevertheless, it's in the Torah, and the reason why is because a person has to strive as much as you possibly can to affect those character traits. Okay, when a person, before a soul comes into this world, the Gemara tells us, right? They make him promise, they make the soul promise, you're going to try to be a tzaddik, you're going to try to be a completely righteous person and not a rasha, an evil person. And therefore, even though you're not guaranteed that you're able to completely change your natural makeup, spiritual makeup, you must try. You must try as much as you can to affect it, and you can affect it. It's a possibility. It's just not something that you're guaranteed that you're able to 100% accomplish. And therefore, you're not, God doesn't command you to do it, right? In comparison to the thought, speech, and action, which is something that, as we said, you are able to, right? A person can 100%, even if it's hard, to control what they're going to do, what they're going to say or not say, and what they're going to think or not think. Okay, so that's why it appears in the Torah, because a person, even though you don't have the ability to 100% accomplish it necessarily, you must try as much as you possibly can. Okay. Okay. So what's the reason, right, that the thought, speech, and action is something that we're able to actually conquer, to change 100%. Well, the other one is much harder. So the reason why is because it's in the name, exactly. Thought, speech, and action, as we said, are called garments, right? So if you focus on the metaphor here, right, it's very simple, right? If you want to change the way you look, if you want to change your hair color, if you want to change, your body, in any way, you're able to affect it somewhat, right? You exercise, maybe you can, kind of paint over your hair, but it's not really changing who you are, right? To change your body is very hard, right? There's certain things you can change, right? But certain things you can't. It's part of who you are. It's much more connected to you, right? It's your body. In contrast to that, you have garments, right? And just like, like we call them garments for a reason, thought, speech, and action, we call them garments for a reason. And that is because just like garments that you wear, right? You're wearing a shirt or a sweater or whatever it is, you can decide, you know what, I don't want these. These are dirty. These don't look good. I want to have something else, and you can change them, right? You can change them without necessarily a lot of effort, right? So garments, when we use this metaphor of garments, we are very, very specific as to the reason why, right? They are not part of who you are. They are not part of your essence in any way, right? They're vehicles. They're vehicles for you to express yourself, just like a garment, physical garment, right? Allows you to express yourself, right? You can express yourself through your clothes, but it also allows you to sort of, go out in public, like it covers you up in a way that allows you to be present, to interact with other people in a way that's, kind of that's modest, and, that allows you to keep your dignity, right? It also protects you. It also protects you from the cold and from the heat, right? So it has its functions, but it's a vehicle for you to be able to express yourself, but it's not really part of who you are. And the same thing applies to thought, speech, and action, right? These are changeable. These are not part of who you are in essence, and therefore, right, you can affect how you choose to utilize them, and you can actually change them. Just like you could change your shirt, you can change your thought. Just so you could change your pants, you could change your speech. That's how it works. Okay. But now, and just by the way, there's like a side point here, that even though, right, speech and action are slightly different to the third garment, which is thought. And even though, like, speech and action, you could decide not to do something, or you could decide not to talk, right? You could also decide to, if you're going to say something that's wrong, you could change it and speak about something that's positive. Thought, even though it's slightly different, you would think like, what? I can't control what I think. So the reality is you can, even though, it's very, very hard to stop thinking, right? That, unlike speech and action, which is you just, if you don't speak, if you don't do something, it's pretty easy. You can just stop it. Thought is a constant stream. You're always thinking, right? Obviously, there are people that through meditation or whatever it is they can accomplish clearing their mind, but a normal person, right? To stop thought is very, very hard, and that's not the goal. That's not what we're aiming for. What you are able to do, however, is to change your thoughts, right? So if a person, for example, is thinking of something that's not positive, even though you might not necessarily be able to just turn it off and be like, I'm not going to think right now about this, it doesn't usually work. So what you usually should do, right, is if you're thinking about something you don't want to be thinking about, right, you don't try to not think about it, right? It's like saying, don't think about a pink elephant, right? You're going to think about it. So telling yourself, I'm going to stop thinking about X, Y, or Z, it's never really going to work, right? It's just going to keep coming back to thinking about it. So what you are able to do is change your thought. So if you're thinking about something which is not positive, and then you decide, I'm going to think about something that is positive, and you start thinking about whatever it is, something you learned, something that's, more on a positive note. By thinking of something else, automatically you won't think of the previous thing. And that's what you are able to do. So even though thought is a little bit more, it's a little closer to us, to our soul, right? It's a little bit harder to manipulate than maybe speech and action. You're still able to control it. And you control it by switching it, even though, again, you can't turn it off, right? But you can switch it. You can switch it for something else. So we still have control over our thought. Okay, now we're going to go on and we're going to explain something a little bit deeper. And that this is really the crucial point, I think, of this Maimer. Up until now, we explained, right, that the reason why God does command us to conquer our thought, speech, and action is because that's something we're able to conquer. Right? Whereas the rest of our nature, we're not guaranteed that we have the ability to 100% transform it, right? But now we're going to go on and we're going to see that it's actually a little bit more than that. Because if you just leave it there, it kind of is a little bit of a bummer, right? It kind of seems like, okay, I can't really do all that much, so I'm kind of left with, okay, whatever, I'll work with what I can. But now we're going to see that that's not how it works, right? It's actually, there's a deeper, stronger reason of why God specifically allowed us to conquer our thought, speech, and action, and not the rest. Okay, so one of the reasons why God actually wants us to command us and wants us to focus and created the world in such a way that which everybody can actually conquer thought, speech, and action is because it actually is more important. It actually has a greater effect on the world, and it's actually closer to what God wants, right? God's mission for us in this world is actually accomplished through that thought, speech, and action. Okay, so to understand this, right? Just think about it this way: you can have a person, right? So, if that person comes over to you and is dressed, in tattered clothes, broken, dirty, automatically, right? You're gonna see him in a certain way. You're gonna see him as a beggar, a person, like person that doesn't have so much going for them. Whether you like it or not, it's gonna affect the way you see them and the way you interact with them, right? Take that same person and dress them up like a king, right? Beautiful garments. Automatically, people will deal with him in a different way. We'll see him in a completely different light, right? It completely changes how a person is dressed to the way he is perceived, to the way that he is honored, right? Again, whether we like it or not, it's going to change. That the garments, the way a person is dressed, has that ability to raise a person up, right? Or to bring a person down. In a similar way, right? Our spiritual garments have that same ability with our soul. If we dress our soul in soiled, dirty garments, it brings the soul, in other words, with bad thoughts, speech, or an action, it's actually able to affect the soul in a way that it's going to become lowly and act in a lowly way, right? Think about it also, by the way, like when you're dressed in a certain way, right? You're dressed, if you're dressed in a casual way, you're more likely to act casually. If you're dressed in a very, put together way, you act slightly different. You behave, you carry yourself slightly different. One of the reasons why, the Torah tells us to dress like Jews, right? We have a yarmulke, we have tzitzis, we dress tznius, a Jew should be recognizable, right? Is because the way you dress affects the way that you're perceived, and the way that you're perceived affects the way that you behave, right? So a person, let's say that's, dressed like a Jewish man or Jewish woman, will think twice before going over a red light. Will think twice before behaving in a certain way, because they know that now it's not just me behaving the way I want to behave. I'm representing something. If I go ahead and I do something wrong, it makes God look bad. It makes Jews everywhere look bad, because look at me, I'm wearing a yarmulke, I'm wearing tzitzis, I'm wearing, a tznius dress or whatever it is. So it's going to affect the way that that you behave. You're going to think twice because you're representing something. That's the power of garments. And spiritual garments work in very much the same way. Spiritual garments, even though they're somewhat external to us, they have the ability to raise us up to the highest heights or to drag us down to the lowest of the low. If your thought, speech, and action is good, it can take your soul and elevate it greater than it was before it came down into this world. That's the power of our garments, the power of our actions, of our thoughts, of our speech. And the same is the opposite. If those are bad, it can drag the soul down. And the reason why Kabbalistically we say that these garments are actually able to have such a powerful effect on the soul is because it actually, spiritually, they come from a higher source. So even though they're lower in this world, right, they're more external, right? You would think they're less spiritual, right? Thought, speech, action compared to like my spiritual makeup of my emotions and intellect and whatever, right? They're nevertheless come from a higher source. They come from a point that's closer to God, okay? And in a way, like one principle that we have in Kabbalah and in Hasidus is that if you have a wall and the wall falls down, right? The highest point ends up being the point that's further away. Okay, so the higher you are in that wall, the highest rock, when that wall falls, the highest rock, the highest point is actually the one that's going to be the furthest away from where the wall was. In many ways, when something is lower in this world, it means that it somehow comes from a higher, more spiritual point. And therefore, even though it seems like something that's secondary, these thought, speech, and action, it actually is closer to God in a way, has more power than we can even imagine. And that's why that thought, speech, and action has the ability to make us or break us more than even your own spiritual makeup. So now we understand, right, that the reason why God commanded Yehoshua to send spies to Jericho, right? That's why God gave a commandment to completely conquer, right? Like to scout out and conquer and make sure that these three things, that Jericho is 100% under our control, is not just because that's what you can handle. Like you're not there, you're not at Sadiq. But no, God did that on purpose, not just because that's what you can handle. God make it so this is what you can handle, what everybody can handle, because it's really the most important thing. And when God sent our souls down into this world, he did so not so that we can change who we are and connect to the high spiritual. He did so that we can control our thought, speech, and action, to do mitzvahs that are specific to action mitzvahs, speech mitzvahs, and even thought mitzvahs, because that is what really counts, and that is what's gonna accomplish that our soul, which was lofty before it came down into this world, is able to connect to something even higher than it was before it came into this world, right? We have a soul that was one with God, connected to God. Why did it need to come into this world? Very simple, because in this world, you can interact with physicality. And you do so through your actions. You do so through your speech, and you do so through your thoughts, right? And when you do that, right, you don't just go back to being all spiritual like you were before your neshama, your soul came down into this world. You're actually able to tap into something higher, greater. That's what you're able to do through these garments. And that's why God commands specifically these garments. That's why God made so that this is something we all have the ability to conquer, because it's the most important thing. But there's a little bit more. And we said that Jericho, okay, the garments of the soul, which is represented again by Jericho, is called the lock, the gateway into the land, right? You conquer Jericho, right? With its huge wall, you conquer it. Now you're able to go into the land and actually conquer the rest of the land. And so too it works spiritually, right? When you conquer Jericho, your thought, speech, and action, that is the gateway that will allow you to also start affecting your emotional, spiritual makeup. So if you want to start affecting that, which you should try to do, even though, again, it's not 100% in your hands to accomplish it, but you should try as much as you can to change and make sure that your spiritual makeup is positive, right? Then the way you do so is through first conquering your thought, speech, and action. Either way, that's the first step, okay? So even though you can't change what you want, right? You might be able to say, I love certain things which are not good. They're not good. I'm attracted to certain things, or I'm repelled by certain things which I shouldn't be, right? That's just how I am. I can't change it. So the answer is, right, you might not be able to change it. You might not be able to completely change it, but if you want to alter it, if you want to try, right? If you want to try to shift it as much as you possibly can towards, having better character traits, you should try to do that. But the way you do that is through first conquering what you are able to. So maybe you're attracted to some sort of, you like to eat certain foods that are not kosher. Okay, right? So you maybe are not able to control whether you want them or not, but you're able to control whether you eat them or not. You're able to control whether you I don't know, say things that you want to, that you don't want. Sorry, you don't say things that you want to say or not. You're able to control that. But by doing that, that's the gateway that will eventually also allow you to start hopefully improving as much as you possibly can your spiritual makeup. But the most important part is for us to focus on, right, our thought, our speech, and our action. That we can change, and that is the most important part of the reason why our souls came down into this world, for us to conquer that. So that's actually the end of the Maimer. It's a very short Maimer. We did it in 2 classes. So that's pretty good. I guess next week we'll do another one, maybe a Maimer, maybe a Sicha, I'm not sure. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you have any questions, any thoughts, any feedback? Let me know.
I have a question. So is this connected to the? I can't really recall like the source of this, but there's like 4 levels of the soul, and 3 of them are thought, speech, and action. But there's one more that I don't remember is like higher than the 3 or like the lowest than the 3. Is this connected to that idea?
So, well, I mean, I'm not, as far as I'm aware, there are no. So there's 5 levels of the soul. Okay, there's 5 levels of the soul, which we discussed on our previous secha. None of them are it's not like one of them is thought, speech, or action. As I said, the soul itself is comprised of 5 levels, right? Then on top of that, there's the 3 garments, which are external. You could say perhaps that the lowest level of the soul that we're talking about here is what connects to the garments. The dynamics there, I'm not 100% sure, but definitely you don't say that there's 3 levels of the soul, the 4 levels of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action, because again, those are not part of the soul itself. Those are the garments, which obviously relate and connect to the soul, but they're not the soul itself. And the soul itself has 5 levels, which we discussed in our previous Zechah that we learned.
So when someone says or makes reference to like like Asiya, for example, like I've heard that term used to describe like the world of action and so forth. So
that's not
is that related to?
Well, there is a correlation, but just to be clear, Asiya and those worlds are not the soul. Those are the actual universe, the different dimensions, if you will, through which God creates the universe. There's different levels. There's Atzilus, Bria, Etzir, and Asiya. There's correlation. A lot of these things are always correlated in one way or another. So perhaps you could say that Asiya corresponds to the level of Nefesh, and you could probably make some sort of correlation. But that's a different thing. So Asiya, don't confuse Asiya with Maise, right? Maise is the garment of action, which refers to the garment that the soul uses to act in this world. Asiya refers to a spiritual world, which is related to God, actually doing something, which is actually the world itself. It's the different things, even though there's similar, the shorsh is the same. It's not, but don't confuse the two. They're separate things. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Unless there's any more questions, I guess we'll call it a day. Start something else next week.
I have a question.
Rabbi, real quick.
Just 1 second. So Vilma, yeah, go ahead.
So as far as I understand these garments, they are very important and they all carry energy, but as I understand it, thoughts carry the most energy. They're the closest to us, and these are the things that people struggle with the most, like thoughts. And it's so important. Like what you said about changing your thoughts or quieting your thoughts, it's very possible, but you just have to have a very strong sense of self, of who you are and what it is you're looking at as far as your thoughts on an objective level. Like, these are your thoughts, but that doesn't mean that's who you are. And that doesn't mean that what you're thinking is true. Just because you think something doesn't make it true. And thoughts can be analyzed. So you can understand yourself and you can tell yourself, oh, this is what I'm thinking. This is coming from this. And I know that this is wrong. So you talk to yourself in effect. That's what changes your thoughts.
100%. So 100% what you're saying is right. You can definitely change your thoughts. You can definitely, not only you can, but you should. If you need to control your thoughts to think about things in the right way, and we don't always do. And as you said, thought is the garment that is the closest to the soul, right? It's the most spiritual of the 3, if you will, right? And even though you're right, I think people can change people can quiet their thoughts. The general technique, the general advice, right? Let's say, for example, I'll give you an example, right? If you're davening, if you're trying to pray, right, and you're trying to focus and you're talking to God, very often, most of us have this challenge in which, like, we start thinking about something else. We start thinking, about something, work, or about something that we watched, or whatever it is, right? And let's say it's it's something either inappropriate for the time, or it's something that you really don't want to be thinking about. So if at that point you start telling yourself, don't think about this, don't think about the movie that I watched, I don't want to think about it, right? So by telling you that, you're telling yourself that, you're not stopping. First of all, you're definitely not focusing on what you're supposed to be thinking about, which is that I'm praying right now, talking to God, right? But not only that, you're also not going to stop thinking about it, because you keep telling yourself, again, don't think about it. It's like when you say to yourself, don't think about a pink elephant. Pink elephant's the first thing that comes to mind. So what's suggested, the technique that's suggested to usually deal with this, right, is instead of trying to say, don't think about this, to replace those thoughts with something else. So instead you say, you know what, I'm talking to God. And you start actually focusing on what that means and thinking about God, or thinking, automatically you're not thinking about work, or you're not thinking about the movie, right? So that's what I mean to say. So instead of trying to quiet your thoughts, which is a very hard thing to do, you try to instead direct your thoughts towards something that's positive and that's good. So that was that point. But yeah, I think you're 100% on the ball, Vilma. Okay, somebody else had a question? Moshe, I thought you were going to say something before.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, guys. Well, thank you, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll start something else next week. Thank you for coming, and look forward to next Thursday.
Thank you. Good day.
Shalom, Rabbi.
Bye, guys.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.
So